Okay, welcome everyone. This is the 8th meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committees, Districts, and Council Operations Subcommittee. Today is Monday, May 20th, and we're here just for 1 hour from 3:30 to 4:30. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our chair, Jose, will facilitate today's meeting. Next slide, please. Just going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A copy of the recording will be posted on the transition website under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access closed captioning, you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone, so that those in attendance can see the chat, and please remember that the chat is part of the public meeting record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We may not always answer questions live in the meeting, but we read them and they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we are not going to be taking verbal public comment, but folks can give public comment at any time through the comment form online by calling 311 or by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And if folks want to give verbal public comment to the Government Transition Advisory Committee, you can sign up now to do so at our next full meeting on June 11th. Next slide, please, and I will pass it to Jose to review today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Today's agenda will include subcommittee business, the onboarding update, the summer engagement plan, and a debrief of GTAC feedback on our draft recommendations. But before we adjourn our meeting today, we'll identify all the next steps. Next slide, please. Before we get into subcommittee business, I want to remind folks about how we get to our final recommendations in mid-September. Our draft recommendations will be distributed for community input in mid-June. The summer engagement period will run through mid-August, and we'll have 2 regular subcommittee meetings in the summer, one in late July to check in about the public input to date, and then one in late August to revise our recommendations based on all the input we received throughout the summer. We're going to present our final recommendations to GTAC on September 11th for their consideration and to have the whole committee vote on it. The next slide, please. Now, for subcommittee business, SAC is unable to attend today's meeting. Otherwise, we expect full attendance. We do need to approve the April 24th meeting summary. Does anyone have any proposed revisions before I take a motion to approve? Okay, seeing none, I'll take that motion. Does anyone have a motion?
I'll move.
Okay. Moved by Terry, seconded by Lori. Thank you. Do we have any objections? Okay. Seeing no objections, that passes. Now, next slide, please. Now, our next topic of subcommittee business is appointing our new co-chairs. Co-chairs will serve through the presentation of the subcommittee's final recommendation to GTAC on September 11th. And Destiny and Terry have volunteered to serve as co-chairs. Do we have any questions before I entertain a motion? Okay, seeing no questions, do we have a motion?
So moved. This is Juliet.
I second. This is Juanita.
Thank you. It's been moved by Juliet, seconded by Juanita. Do we have any objections to Terry and Destiny being our next co-chairs? Seeing none, we'll consider that approved. And Terry and Destiny will be our next co-chairs. Thank you for serving. Next slide, please. Working agreements. As always, I'll read the working agreements, and Terry, you will have to read those when you're doing this subcommittee. The working agreements state as follows. In discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals, offer constructive suggestions, approach different opinions with curiosity and seek to understand, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work, arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you're unable to attend a meeting. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers, though I do know we're not super good at that. Keep multitasking to a minimum. Keep focus on the objectives of the meetings and utilize the co-chairs to know additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing via email. Next slide. Honor the decisions to the group. Contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. Step up and step back. Collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. Embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members to staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools and use I statements. Next slide, please. And now to the onboarding update. GTAC's onboarding recommendations included a request for a monthly meeting with the city. The first monthly meeting was held in April. The group discussed that the purpose of the meeting is for the city and GTAC to be thought partners and collaborate on planning and developing onboarding for the city and GTAC. For the city, excuse me, they should share information and new developments and report progress on GTAC's recommendations. And while GTAC will advise and track progress and provide oversight, and then also hold the city accountable. The next onboarding meeting will be May 29th, and it will be held as a special meeting of the subcommittee. The attendance is optional. At the meeting, the city will share updates, progress on GTAC's recommendations, and propose next steps, and the onboarding timeline and the deliverables. We'll also have a special meeting of the subcommittee in late June on onboarding to review the onboarding plan. Do we have any brief questions or things folks who are at the meeting might want to share? Okay.
I do have one question. So that meeting, or at least one meeting, was not a public meeting, but the remainder will be, or how's that working?
That meeting was not a public meeting. Julia, do you want to take that?
Yeah, the meetings in the future will be public meetings held as either just as part of the Districts and Council Operations Subcommittee or as a special meeting of the Districts and Council Operations Subcommittee.
Thanks.
Yep.
Anything else? Nope. Okay. Moving on. Next slide, please. The summer engagement plan. We shared the draft summer engagement plan with you in mid-April and asked for any revisions. Today, June will review the plan with you and ensure that we know what is expected of all of us over the summer. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to June.
Sorry, y'all. The meeting slides were a little bit off, but now they're good. So my name is June Reyes. I use she, her pronouns, the Transition Engagement Coordinator. Apologies, I might have meeting crashers, but we'll see. My 2 and 4-year-old are just over there. So I wanted to first thank everyone for their feedback on the plan, including the online survey. I looked through all of the comments and your feedback is really great. And I think we'll make it so that we can get more feedback on GTAC's recommendations. So I wanted to present just some sections from the summer engagement plan, starting with engagement and communication strategies, and I'll take questions at the end. So these strategies kind of outline our approach to engagement, and they're informed by, your comments during subcommittee meetings, some of our debriefs from the previous March engagement, and some other feedback from you all. And so I'm going to start at the top in terms of some of the ways of how we're approaching our work a little bit differently based on this feedback. So first, we're leaning more on partnerships to stretch our engagement. We'll be partnering with Civic Life and the Office of Equity and Human Rights in their Disability Division to host listening sessions. We're going to prioritize having policy discussions with organizations that are often left out of City Hall decision-making and underrepresented, that they were also represented in our March engagement. And in terms of communications, we're creating a unified web presence for all transition-related engagement opportunities, which also provides us the opportunity to cross-promote events throughout the summer. So as an example, I have a graphic on the right side that says Summer of Civic Engagement Checklist. And so this includes the different activities like completing a mock election, sharing public comments, updating your voter registration, or taking a survey or attending a community listening session to provide input on our city's future. And lastly, reflecting a lot on our last engagement, we're going to be making efforts to try to make the content more accessible by using real life examples that are more relatable to folks in their everyday work or how they might engage with the city. And so if we're thinking about this larger schedule of what we have and how the pieces fit in, I would say there are like 5 main topics that we'll need public input on from June through October. The first are your GTAC recommendations. The second is this bucket around recruiting non-elected city leaders. So the city administrator, as well as the equity officer and engagement officer. This third bucket is the voter education activities that will be happening throughout this time. Fourth is a council rules and procedures document that's going to be made available for public comment towards the September-October timeline. And lastly, there are going to be some ongoing code updates to clean up the code to be ready for a new form of government. And so I guess I just also want to point out that engagement is not going to be strong for all the topics. We're not expecting it to be because we're going to be competing with a lot of summer events. But where those topics interconnect, participating in one conversation or one area can impact others. So we're going to make sure too, as an internal team, we're talking and bringing in feedback that builds upon each other. And so I wanted to give a snapshot of the timeline. There's specific dates in your summer engagement plans, but the purpose of this is just to show that we're really in the early summer focusing on getting input around GTAC's recommendations, the city administrator recruitment, and voter education. Towards the latter half of the summer, we're looking at focusing on, continuing to focus on voter education, as well as the council rules and procedures and maybe some more code updates. And so the idea too is that we'll provide a downloadable PDF calendar where folks who are closely tracking this can kind of see all of this and be able to track it more easily than our website. And then I wanted to give some projections to give a sense for the different ways we plan on engaging with folks this summer. So there are going to be 2 surveys open simultaneously for almost 2 months. So that's the one on GTAC's recommendations and the city administrator survey. We're also going to plan to have 5 community listening sessions on GTAC recommendations and 3 voter town halls, which gives us the projected number of 8 over here. And like I said, we're trying to also prioritize policy discussions with community organizations that are representing or work with communities that are underrepresented in our March engagement. And so those groups include those serving immigrants and refugees, young people, folks east of 82nd, the Native community, Black African American community, Asian, Latina, Latinx, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander folks. And lastly, we'll have 2 employee town halls that cover related topics to the transition. And then I want to end with this slide to kind of note that the work doesn't happen without you all and us kind of working together. So being able to kind of put up front some of the expectations of what that might look like, the summer engagement for the summer. So that's going to look pretty different based on which subcommittee or work groups you're a part of. So if you're in this subcommittee, districts and council operations, or the budget work group, expect 2 combined meetings of the subcommittee and work group to be able to, I think, speaking to the timeline, work through those recommendations. And then 3 community listening sessions where we are hoping you'll play active roles. And then if you're in the voter education subcommittee, yes.
My goldfish, but I can't find them.
Okay, we can find your goldfish in a couple minutes.
No, they're out.
Okay, I'm gonna finish this really quick and we'll get the goldfish. And so then if you're in the voter education subcommittee, you'll have monthly meetings, 1 community listening session, and you'll spend about 4 hours doing voter education presentations or tabling. And the optional stuff was on the right side, and that's attending a June onboarding meeting, going to a city administrator community listening session, or doing additional presentations. And so for all GTAC members, in addition to the community education presentations you've committed to quarterly, we're also wanting to note that we've also asked you all to help amplify some of these opportunities through your networks via social, email, etc. And so that was a very quick update, but I felt like maybe hopefully covered the key points and open to any questions folks have.
I had a couple of questions on these slides. Going back to, I think the first one, the one that says engagement and communication strategies. It's got the sunglasses on the sun. Yeah, that one. I see we're partnering with Civic Life and the Office of Equity and Human Rights and hosting listening sessions. Are we building on the work that we've done up till now? Are we developing a list? Are we communicating with the organizations that we have already connected with? And ideally, what the districting commission did, the salary commission, are we sort of somehow standing on, one another's shoulders?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Joe. I definitely hear you on how are we continuing to engage and talk to the people that have already given us input, engage in this conversation. We do have a list of those folks, and they are part of our update folks and invite them to these sessions. So we will definitely be doing that. And in terms of working when partnering with Civic Life, we'll be hosting 3 for community listening sessions. And then we'll host 2 separate ones, one with the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and then a separate one with Civic Life to be able to stretch the outreach of folks that we currently have been sort of cultivating and asking them to participate. So it'll be a little bit of both.
Okay. And then if you go down to the one that has the timeline, a few of those boxes had dots in them, and I just wondered what the rest of those were. There's co-hosted sessions with, and I presumed that that's Civic Life and the Office of Equity, but I wasn't sure.
You are correct. This is definitely not the full thing, but the full summer engagement plan timeline has all the details.
Okay. And then the last was the next one that says projections. Can you describe the way that we're going to coordinate with those community organizations that represent underrepresented communities?
It's a great question. So the number 8 comes from trying to at least talk to somebody within the groups that we had missed out on. And so what I will do is similar to what we did for signing up for roles for the listening session in March, which will be to schedule like get volunteers and schedule folks for certain organizations. And then we'll have a reporting template that we're actually just going to add to your GTAC tracking or your GTAC tracker SurveyMonkey to be able to do that. So great question. I didn't cover that, but I will be helping coordinate that effort. And so if you also have folks you want to have policy discussions with, there'll be a way to track it and I can assist with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Juliet?
Thanks, Jose. So I'm back at that graphic about the checkoff list. Yeah, that one. So just a couple things where it says check off the list. Is that going to be something that you can actually do online or just kind of a mental checklist? What's that going to look like on the web?
So this will be like one rendition of it that will be for a social media graphic, but we also have a smaller sheet that we're handing out at tabling events. So people can literally check off, but we don't have an online way of showing that or doing that.
Okay. And then the tabling events, it just, all I've seen is tabling for voter education. Is there tabling just in general for charter reform or any other topics or just for that one? I'm not trying to think up work for us, but just wondering.
No, that's a great question. I think we're leading with voter education and this is definitely related to the elected leaders that they're bringing in. So we will have material and folks ready to speak on that side of the work at these tabling events as well. So it's a little bit of both, but our lead is voter education.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Juanita? You're muted still, Juanita. Juanita, you're muted.
Okay. As I was saying, thank you, June, for the presentation. It's very helpful. It's very nice the way you put it together. But I'm just out of curiosity. When on the projections, when we said that we're hoping to get or we're targeting 300 responses and 175 people attending these sessions, where those numbers come from? Is that a percentage of the Portland population, or is it just based on the past experiences that we have had?
Great question. So these numbers and projected numbers are based on what our current turnout has been, and then it's stretched. So probably 25 to 30% more than what we've had to try to push ourselves to be able to spread the word even more and convince people, persuade people that maybe this is why they want to engage in this work. So that's what it's based off of.
Okay. So do you happen to know what is the percentage of that related to the population of the city?
We could definitely calculate that and then.
Oh, that's okay. No, I was just wondering, Junior, but that's okay. Thank you so much, June. Thank you again. Thanks again.
Thank you. Terry?
Just a quick question on the ones that we're co-hosting with Civic Life and Office of Equity. It's the same program content-wise, right? Or are we going to add Civic Life content or other content to juice the session?
So I think it's a great question. I think the content that we present about the recommendations will be the same. The format, we are sort of negotiating the agenda together. And so, for example, the one with the disability division, that is to be able to have more of a conversation around equitable access. And I know that will also probably come up. So, we'll be able to, I think some of the conversation will probably get taken up with what folks are most interested in. But the core of it is really doing the same presentation and asking the same questions.
You. Juanita, do you have another question? No? Okay. Anyone else? Well, thank you, June. That was very helpful. Hope other members of GTAC just watch that little portion at least. I think it would be helpful for everyone. And now we move on to the GTAC feedback from last week. We have the remainder of the meeting to do this. And we can see if we can agree to the revisions. Next slide, please. We heard the following feedback at last week's meeting. I'll give folks a few minutes to review the slide and just let me know if this reflects what everyone heard, if there's anything missing. Joe?
The one under committee composition, we talked about representation maybe meaning maybe being a bit ambiguous. And if it says meaningful representation, that people might take that to mean on the committee, on the subcommittee. So I wonder if it's more like a meaningful voice or meaningful input or something like that, rather than representation.
Yeah, I do know we took out the phrase decision making, and just left representation. I believe that's what we decided, but that's a good distinction.
I understand what it means, but people reading it might not.
Mhm. Yeah, I have a meaningful voice, I think would perfectly sum up what we're trying to say. Maybe even a little better. Is there anything else? And I do know Lori emailed something that she wanted to cover.
Do you want me to talk about that now?
Sure.
Because it wasn't on this page, but
No,
I
it's
just
fine.
had,
This is the only page for this.
I just had two things as I was, kind of going over it with a fine tooth comb. The idea of representation came up in two places that I wasn't sure were appropriate. So on page 5, let's see if I can find it.
I actually have the document too. If folks feel like they've looked at this slide enough, I could screen share the track changes document, like we could look at the parts Lori's talking about or the part that Joe talked about. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Lori.
That'd be good.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. On page 5, the second to last paragraph, where we say some GTAC members wanted to continue researching. Oh, no, that's not it. Sorry. Let me look at my email. I'm sorry, I wasn't ready here.
I think it was page 6.
Well, yeah, there were two places, page 5 and page 6. Let's see if I can.
Can you zoom it in a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Well, let me go. While I can't find the representation.
Yeah, I mean, Lori, do you want to hold 1 second? I can show people the changes based on the last week's conversation, and then we could talk about new changes.
Thank you. That's a great idea.
And give you a moment. And I will say, I think I said this in an email to you all yesterday, but some of the changes were super straightforward. There's 2 comments I think we received at last week's meeting that did not lead me to make revisions, but I welcome thoughts about it. One was sort of highlight which of these recommendations are more actionable items. And the second was, are we being explicit enough about making public comment more accessible versus how it is now? So I just want to say I heard those 2 things and I did not make changes based on them. So the changes I sent out on the weekend, everything's in track changes. So here's there's sort of a combo change that Joe was just referencing. So we deleted a recommendation from council committee composition and moved a variation of it to council committee structure and procedures. And so it's this, we combined it with an existing recommendation, ensure appropriate resources, including access to subject matter experts and those directly impacted by the issues. And kind of now as a hyphen, diverse perspectives and lived experiences should be represented, and communities historically left out of city hall decision-making should have meaningful representation. Or you could consider the word voice. The strike through is just the deletion of that moved up. And then really the only other change was based on how kind of robust the conversation about council committees is not really a change to the recommendations themselves, but just an introductory paragraph so that folks understand, like we just go right into standing committees without saying what a council committee is, that we don't have them now, what a standing committee is, that it's also common to have ad hoc committees. And these are sort of suggestions. Oh, sorry, I apologize. I deleted the note to GTAC, obviously. And then what used to say as a potential standing committee, the 4 disciplines, now just says community engagement, equity, and communications. So those were the ones I made based on the feedback I heard last week. Thanks. Turn it back to you, Jose.
And we're looking at what Lori was speaking of, page 5.
Yeah, if you could look at the last paragraph on page 5, where it says, some of us feel that although in-district offices are expensive, certain parts of our community, including East Portland, lack representation and access to local government. So I thought that the lack representation, while I know that's been historically an issue, I think with a new form of government, that won't be the issue. So I don't know that we want to include that there. And we sort of say the same thing on page 6, the second to last paragraph. And the corresponding issue of representation and access. So again, this representation, I don't think that, unless I'm misunderstanding what we mean by that comment of representation, it seems like it's not the issue anymore, and we should take that out. Access is certainly.
I think you could look at it in different ways. You can look at it as geographical representation. I think that's the way you're meaning. District 1 won't be geographically underrepresented. While a lot of people in East Portland, it is also where the most diversity in the whole city is. So a lot of people will look at that and think representation, not based just on the fact that they live in East Portland, but also representation as far as different demographics of people. And we don't know if that's going to be fixed. We hope that it will be, but we don't know if that will be fixed by having more people. So I think it could go either way, because I totally understand what you're saying. We will definitely fix the fact that there will be 3 people from East Portland. But the question is, will we actually have representation of all the different communities we have?
I hear that, and I'm not sure that talking about where we're having district offices, if that representation is really the concern. It's more about access. It was, I thought, always what we were talking about. And my other comment, and these are just suggestions, is on page 6, the second full paragraph, last sentence, where we talk about temporary offices and we say that this allows them to design the permanent offices next year and propose a new budget. I think that I don't believe that's why we recommended temporary offices. Yeah. And this sentence also alludes to the fact that permanent offices in the districts is going to be the solution after the research is done. So I would either delete that sentence or edit it to explain why we do feel temporary offices in each district are warranted.
Thank you, Lori. I hear that. That sense feels like it should be, if they decide, it will allow them to do, Joe?
Yeah, I think I guess I'm suggesting that somebody other than the whole group, take one crack at this. The word representation is ambiguous, and I think that if we're having disagreements about what it might mean, somebody who's just reading it and has, no background, no context, is going to have a much harder time. So, maybe somebody could just look at where that word appears and find better ways to express it so that we eliminate the ambiguity.
Thanks, Joe. Juliet?
Yeah, just to do what Joe just said not to do, which is some wordsmithing. I agree with Lori's comments. I think the second one, we could just sidestep it and say allows them to address the issue of district offices, what happened to that page? Next year or whatever it would be. Allows them to address the issue of district offices next year and propose a new budget. And then we're just passing the buck to them. And then the other one that she was talking about, and I actually think that I wrote, or I kind of created both of these sentences that she found, and they're sort of left over. And the other one about kind of is sort of justifying the district offices with representation. And let's hope that we are addressing the representation issue in the new charter. So it is kind of redundant in that sense that that's part of why we're doing all this. So there's probably, we can probably simplify, that other sentence too, just to say, there, done, pass the buck. We represent, I mean, we're already kind of past this. I think we could do without that paragraph altogether because we're sort of past, it's not gonna be our topic anymore. But
What do you mean it's not going to be our topic?
well, I mean, it's gonna be a topic for the new council.
Yeah,
It's-
do keep in mind that we are together until a few
Until
months
March.
into the new council.
That's
So-
true. Yeah,
So I think something we've talked about is to be very explicit about asking some of these questions about district offices, not because we think we're going to change anything for this budget cycle, because that's ship has sailed, but just to be able to give the new council as much information from the community as how they feel about this as possible, and then let them decide based on that information. So I think the conversation is ongoing. So I feel like it's appropriate to continue the conversation, but I do take Lori's comments and we might should be able to wordsmith some of those things a little better.
yeah.
Juanita?
Yes, I kind of have the same concern that you have, Jose, in the sense that from the given the sample of people that attended the sessions, the information sessions and the questionnaires, those are very small sample. So we really don't have a good basis in terms of the size of the city in terms of population, and the feedback from the community is telling us about district offices, if they want them or not. I mean, I cannot rely on I have a difficult time relying on the small sample that we got in terms of the seeking the input from the community. I think that if we go back to this piece, because it has been confusing from the beginning in terms of why we recommended low-cost offices, because we felt that the community wanted to have something, and we wanted to offer the opportunity to have at least some place where they could meet with the districts, with the new councilors in their districts. So we said, and we also recommended we recommended to stop the work that the staff was conducting that were being told by the city council. They were given a directive to start looking for permanent sites, to do the whole thing about new buildings. And we agree with the staff and we said no, because there's not enough information. We don't know what type of, if services are going to be provided from those district offices. We don't know anything. So we want to get the feedback of the population. So I think that we need to keep in mind and upfront our position that the district offices is not off the table. That is still is there, but that is going to be based more into what the community wants. That's what I was also questioning, the number of responses that we're seeking in terms of the new community engagement that we're going to perform during the summer, because I think that we need larger numbers. And the city needs to support that effort. The city needs to support how they're going to mobilize the community. We as a committee with 15 people trying to mobilize the community is impossible after there has been no community engagement in the past. So the city has to invest some money to try to mobilize and have more feedback, and maybe in different ways than we're trying to do it. I don't know. But this is my concern. I think that I just feel uncomfortable saying one way or the other without getting more feedback from the community. So I think it's important that that is corrected in terms of that. No, that is not an issue that is done. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Juanita. Joe? Julia, is yours hand up again, or is that?
I had more, but I'll go after Joe.
Okay,
So-
Joe.
So this is just a detail. I mean, it's literally one word, but with this thing on the screen, I've been, reading it more closely than I had in the past, I guess. And under number 4, it says temporary low cost, very up at the top. Temporary low cost offices are defined as follows: accommodations for up to 8 staff total per district. Did we really mean that we want to be able to accommodate 8 staff members? I thought that was to accommodate meetings that had 8 people total.
No, well, I'm sorry. My recollection, I don't know where that.
Juanita, hold on.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
Julia, do you want to answer that to the exact wording of our recommendation that was passed?
Yeah, pretty much all of number 4 was recommended and proposed to you all by the facilities staff in a previous districts and council operations subcommittee meeting, and then you approved that same language by vote. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the district's conversation was a lot and there were a lot of details, a lot of things, so I completely understand not having to understand all the different parts or misunderstanding some parts, but that's why we're going over it again. Juliet?
Yeah, I apologize if we talked about this before. I'm on page 4, number 4, when we talk about the centralized communication platform, council agendas and schedules. Did we talk about, is this going to trickle down to committee work as well? Is that just implied here? Or is it just going to be at the council level? And continuing on, do we know if this is going to be 311? Or are we still looking at other platforms? I know I'm kind of wandering into the communications area. And then, of course, I wonder what's going to happen to the website. And I know that belongs in another meeting, but.
No, that's an excellent point, Juliet, because I do believe that at the meeting we talked about the centralized platform also having to do with committees, or at least it was brought up because I know I mentioned in the research I did that the centralized platforms we saw listed all the committees and the topics and different ways so we did talk about that. So it might be something worth mentioning that we want that centralized communication platform for city council business as well as committee business. It could be argued that it could be implied, but it could also argue that it's not. So
I think it'd be good to clarify it.
Agreed. Thank you. Juanita?
Thank you.
No,
you
say my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say something to Juanita's point. I do agree that it's difficult when we get low engagement, especially the last time we did listening sessions, we had a very short window. We have a much bigger window for summer, and we have a much more runway to prepare and let people know. And I think it's going to be on all of us to really try to get people to participate and come out. I know I tried for the last one. East Side is notoriously bad at responding to these because they've notoriously felt that all the times they said something, no one ever heard them. So people stop responding. So it's going to take extra work to get certain groups to respond, but it is more of an engagement period. So hopefully we can do a little bit of that work, not just have it just be the city. Yes, we want the support from the city too, but also on all of us to try to get people to fill out those surveys and attend the listening sessions and those things. Do we have any other feedback or input? Julia?
Yeah, I guess I just want to, I mean, I've heard, I don't know, probably 5 proposed changes, but like from 1 or 2 people. So I'm not sure. Like you've seen the revisions that are in here. I can't tell if like we've agreed to any of those additional revisions.
We can go through them and see if we all agree we want to make those changes. The first one that I think is the one that was already made, I think we all agree to, changing that one sentence that made it sound that in district permanent office were for sure. That change was already made by Julia. Did anyone have any objections to that change being made? Okay, I don't see any objections. Okay, the next feedback we got also from Lori was to look at those 2 places that talk about lack of representation. And I think Joe mentioned this, and have someone wordsmith that a little to clarify, because if you, like I mentioned, we can mean representation demographics, but we can mean just geographic representation. Is that something we want to clarify? Terry?
Yeah, on that point, I think I would suggest that anytime we mean geographic representation, we should probably delete it, because we're saying that the districts exist and that's your geographic representation from here on out to eternity. But if it's demographic representation or representation of of something else specific, then we should just be specific. So the question is, are we going to, when we use the word representation, do we mean demographic representation? That's the wordsmithing that still needs to be done. And I don't really have a preference. But I think if we extract geographic representation from the text, we'll be better off.
Juanita?
Yeah, but I have 2 things. The first one is regarding Terry's comment. I think that if we say geographic, we have these city values as that is equity and representation. So there is those values there that say that they should be ethnically, represented, everybody. So geographic, I don't know, but so it can go either way. But I mean, if we say regional, we assume that every district will have equal participation from the ethnic groups that live in that geographic area. But that is an assumption, of course, so I don't know if it needs to be spelled out to be able to make people accountable for it. That's the issue. The other thing, I had a question for Julia. Is this the last time that we have time to make recommendations? I didn't look into the document because I was in bed on Saturday, very sick. And, I didn't think I was going to make it today, but I'm feeling a little bit better, but I haven't had a chance to really read the document thoroughly and really, so I want to know, is there another opportunity to give more feedback on this document, Julia, or this is it?
This is it. And I mean, this document is the same document that GTAC saw
Mhm.
has had for the last 2 weeks. Like, it's the document that you all considered
Yeah.
and agreed to revisions last Wednesday.
Mhm.
So there's really no I mean,
Okay,
it's
thank you.
just these like 2 track changes and now like a word that we're talking about. So yeah, we need to kind of turn these into all of the community documents. So yeah, this is
Yeah,
it. But
it's-
remember, these are draft, right? The
Yes,
whole
I
thing
agree.
is draft recommendations for
We will,
additional.
yeah,
So-
okay, thank you, Julia, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so and also I was just thinking about representation. What do we mean? Do we mean just representation as in bodies on the council, or do we need representation as in is East County being represented in the decisions and priorities the city is making? Because we might end up with 3 people from East Portland that 9 people from not East Portland overrule every single time. So there's also that, right? Hopefully that won't happen but there's still that chance. Joe?
Yeah, I want to say exactly what you did, I think, in a little bit more words. The problem is that representation often is taken to mean that our elected officials reflect the community. And that's one form of representation. But when we talk about underrepresented communities,
That's
we're not just talking about what the city council's composition is, because, 20% of our city council now is Black. So does that mean the Black community is not underrepresented? Of course they are. And somehow we need to be able to make that distinction between the way that the community is reflected in our elected officials and the way people are represented in our political processes. So representation is ambiguous, and I'd just like to be more specific about what we mean when we use the word representation.
Thank you, Joe. I think Julie just proposed a change by writing the corresponding issues of representations in city decision making and access to city government, which makes it a little less unambiguous. Are people okay with this? Do we have any objections or comments? I see a thumbs up. Yep, few thumbs up. Okay, so we'll go with that.
I'd like
Nope.
to request that Juliet go back through the document, find every place that representation appears, and make sure that we've eliminated ambiguities. That it may be that one clarification does it, but it may be that we need to do a little bit more.
No, thank you,
I
Joe.
agree.
Good point.
And Juliet, you've been a great I don't know, it's not exactly proofreader, copy editor, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do it. How soon do I need to do it, Julia?
But pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, and if you can't, I understand.
Oh, I can do
So-
it. I can do it. This
Yeah.
is not a bad week for it.
Yeah, and thank you, Julia, for doing all this. As you guys noticed, we received a bunch of emails from Julia on a Sunday, which I'm sure Julia was thrilled to be working on a Sunday. And were there any other major revisions we wanted to make that we should consider? What's the other one?
There was Joe's voice thing.
That was just one of those places where representation appeared, and we can
Here.
fix that by just using, have a meaningful voice rather than using.
I actually really like a meaningful voice. Have a meaningful voice. I think that speaks more in that sense to what we want. You can have all the people in the room, but if you don't listen to them, I like the idea of just changing that to a meaningful voice. Does anyone have any comments or objections? No? Okay.
I think that was it. Oh. Sorry, one more, but then I realized we didn't need to wrap up. Advisory bodies council website thing.
Oh, yes. in the centralized platform, number 4 on constituent relations, create a centralized platform. Right now it says city council business and city and council agendas. I think we want to put in there including all committee business. Is that just to make sure that's not missed? Is
Council committees.
that council committees? Yes.
Oh. I'm tracking.
Yeah, because I think you could read that and think it's just for the city council meetings and not for their actual committees. Just for the main meeting. Does anyone have any objections to adding that?
Right, I think city council business is fine, but then when you get into specific agendas and schedules, you kind of need to say that it's not just the council.
Yeah. And
City council and city council committee business.
Yeah,
yeah. And Juliet, I think we all agree, at least I see no objection. So when you're doing your representation, quick edits, if you want to take a stab at that one, especially since it was yours, I think you might be the best one to make that.
okay, I'll put in all kinds of stuff.
Okay. We trust you. Okay. Is there anything else? I think we fixed all the things everyone wanted fixing. No? Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to the table with all that. Well, excuse me, my computer. Okay. Now, as always, the recording to this meeting will be posted on the committee's website, and it's going to be available after the meeting ends at the Office Management and Finance YouTube channel. On Thursday, we're going to have a budget work group meeting. The Voter and Candidate Education and Outreach Subcommittee meeting meets on May 28th. We have a special meeting of this subcommittee on onboarding on May 29th, which is optional again. And the next full GTAC meeting is going to be on June 11th. And I hope there will be dinner. I'll be there, hopefully. Next slide, please. Again, thank you all for your participation. We are adjourned. See y'all later.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.